Welcome to Real Estate IQ Wisdom for Smart Moves. We will explore the insider secrets tailored exclusively for Silicon Valley home buyers, sellers, and investors, arming you to conquer the unique real estate landscape. So, without further ado, let's dive into this exciting conversation. Today, we welcome Ted Stefanos, the Vice President of Natural Hazard Disclosure at HomeDart. He has been pivotal in understanding and communicating natural hazard risks in real estate. His comprehensive knowledge is invaluable for homeowners and investors in Silicon Valley. Thank you to our sponsor, TradeMyHome.com, for their community commitment and for making this podcast possible. In Silicon Valley, 17% of properties face $200 million in potential flood damages due to dam failures. Another 23% risk $50 million in losses from wildfires, aggravated by outdated risk assessments. Additionally, 11% of homes confront environmental hazards like lead and mold, with health and property costs reaching $30 million. Silicon Valley's resilience and innovation are crucial in addressing these real estate challenges and safeguarding the region's future. Our host today, Charid Gupta, is a real estate broker in Silicon Valley and brings a wealth of life and professional experience to his role as a podcast host. The following content is only for informational purposes. Please consult a licensed consultant for your specific situation or if you need any specific legal or tax advice.
Ted, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me today.
Can you explain what is liquefaction?
Yeah, liquefaction is a quicksand-like effect that can take place in the soil. So one thing you need to have is an earthquake. So you have to have the shaking. You also have to have water. So not necessarily surface water, but groundwater that's very high near the surface. And thirdly, you need the soil that is conducive towards liquefaction. So that sandy, silty, or bay mud soil is the most prone to liquefaction. And if all three of those conditions are present, like we saw in the Marina District in '89 during that earthquake, then you can have liquefaction occur. So in general, you need a pretty strong earthquake in order for that to occur. Your 5.0 earthquakes, typically you're not going to see liquefaction occur. But once you move up into the 6, 7, and it really depends on, it kind of depends on how well the home is built as well. So other parts of the world, you could see liquefaction much more common than it might be in the Bay Area.
And how would you explain dam inundation?
Well, dam failure inundation areas, one thing that's important to understand is that it doesn't trigger insurance requirements. So if you're within a dam failure inundation area, currently it doesn't trigger insurance requirements. That might change in the future. You never know. But it's pretty common to be within a dam inundation zone in flat-lying areas, especially if you're near creeks and rivers, because in California, we have over nearly about 1,000 reservoirs just in the state alone. And there's only a couple natural lakes. Lake Tahoe is a natural lake. Clear Lake is a natural lake. But almost every sizable body of water in California is a man-made reservoir. And so you would have a dam, and if that dam ever fails or even gets breached, you would have water flow downstream from that reservoir and possibly negatively impacting homes and life in general. So, and it really depends on, how much water is released, or if there's, we don't see instantaneous dam failures where, meaning the dam is there 1 minute and gone the next, but we will see partial breaches or collapsing of a dam where water over the several hours, it gets released from a dam or a broken dam. We saw it in Baldwin Hills in 1966, I think, in Los Angeles, and then also San Francisco Reservoir in Los Angeles in the 1920s. There was really kind of an engineering flaw with the dam and caused it to collapse, and I think 400 people died as a result of that. So it was a really significant hazard. But engineering practices have improved over the decades and years, and so we do have the state responsible for having those dam owners check the dams, maintain them. We have Anderson Reservoir in Morgan Hill right now has been undergoing a retrofit and upgrade. So what they do is they lower the reservoir water levels to maybe 50% capacity while they're making improvements to the dam. Once those are finished, then they can fill it back up again. So it's something that emergency officials take really seriously, and they monitor those dams. But from a disclosure standpoint, we've seen a lot of updates too. Over 800 maps have been updated over the last 4 or 5 years. I think it was Senate Bill 92 that the previous governor signed into law that required dam owners to update the information because the dam inundation maps that we were using were very, very out of date. Sure. They were done in the 70s. Now with modeling that they can do with elevation modeling, it's so much more accurate on where they assume that the water is going to go. And so that's a good thing. So, but yeah, I mean, it is pretty common though to be in a dam inundation zone. And I would also say from a buyer standpoint, it really depends on how close you are to the dam to whether or not I would be, thinking about it as far as a deterrent from buying a property. If you're 20, 30 miles away from a dam, like say you're in downtown San Jose, that really wouldn't bother me that much. Right. Where I live in Sunnyvale, we have an inundation area from Stevens Creek Dam, but it doesn't keep me up at night. Right. But the water would mainly go along Stevens Creek. If I was right at the foot of the dam, it's another story, right? So it's all up to the individual though on what they, factor in with risk. So,
can you discuss how has legislation changed around NHDs and how that is important for homeowners and other real estate professionals?
Sure. Well, the first natural hazard legislation came about after the 1971 San Fernando Valley earthquake, Silmar earthquake. And this really changed building codes because prior to that time, builders didn't really take into account earthquake fault zones. And building codes really changed after that. So they imposed setbacks so you could not build structures right on top of any active faults. And what we've seen over the years and over the decades is that once there's a major natural hazard that has occurred, you'll see legislation get passed after that. So after the 89 earthquake, we saw the seismic hazard map legislation pass. That was an effort to map out landslide areas and liquefaction hazards. Because of the Oakland Hills fire, soon after that, we had the Bates Bill get passed, and that was an effort to map out very high fire hazard severity zones. And so, but these things have evolved over the years because now we have more fire zone legislation that's passed because fires are such a hot topic in the state of California. The seismic hazard maps, those have been really slow to come out. Most of the major populated areas around California, the seismic hazard maps are released, but they are still, like I mentioned before, they are coming out with new maps in February in Contra Costa County. So they still have a long way to go as far as mapping out the whole state. But as far as other legislation goes, we've seen things get passed, whether it's airport influence areas, things that are almost man-made, considered even formerly used defense sites, right? These are areas where the military once owned and operated Department of Defense activities on the site. And what happened in the 1980s, three children, I think, were killed detonating like an anti-tank shell in San Diego. And it was the Tierra Santa area of San Diego where it was a World War II training area, right? And so what happens is like you have something bad happens, legislation gets written, said now you're going to have to start disclosing that within, if you're buying property within 1 mile of any of these defense sites, that will need to be disclosed. So that's what we see in California. When something bad happens, legislation gets passed. And who knows what's next? It's kind of hard to envision what's the next bit of legislation going on. But lately, it's been mostly fire hazard legislation.
Get a guaranteed cash offer on your home from TradeMyHome.com, powered by Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty. We provide upfront written offers at a price agreeable to you. Experience a guaranteed sell with a hassle-free, highest and best price sell within your time frame. Are you selling your home in the next 3 to 6 months? Text PAIR to 408-740-7400 for a free and no obligation professional equity appraisal report. For more information, visit TradeMyHome.com or call 408-740-7400. Remember, at TradeMyHome.com, your home is sold guaranteed or we'll buy it.
What has been the most enlightening moment in your extensive career in NHTs?
I would have to say back a little more than 10 years ago, there was a horrible earthquake in Japan and tsunami, and I was watching it live on TV on CNN, 10 o'clock at night, and you can see the tsunami come in. I think it's the city of Sendai in Japan. And my daughter was up watching it with me, and I was like, we were watching it together, and it was amazing how we watched people, move up into the hillside areas. They knew the tsunami was coming. They had it prepared. They got out. They got out of that because they had sirens, and a lot of people tragically died in that, but it would have been a lot more if they weren't educated, right? Sure. And so my daughter, she said to me, like, Daddy, that's what you do, It was really cool because she realized, I think at that time she was only 6 or 7 years old, and she realized that, that's what I do is help educate buyers, like if they know, say they're in Pacifica or Santa Cruz, right, and they're in a tsunami inundation area and they get the NHT report, they might be a little surprised, like, oh, I need to plan for this, And they may, you've seen signs on the coast in California where it says tsunami evacuation zone. You might see it, but there might not be air raid sirens or what Japan has. Japan is so well educated on what to do in the event of a tsunami. It saves a lot of lives. And so, but we don't quite have it in California just because it's not as tsunami prone as Japan. But anyway, it was really enlightening because my daughter saw that, and I didn't even put it together really either because I'm so used to what I do. But it was really cool. Like, we are possibly saving lives by people getting those NHD reports, reading it, interpreting it, understanding it, and implementing it into protecting themselves in the event of an earthquake or fire or tsunami. So,
what are the top 2 things which buyers should really look for in an NHT report?
So if I only had to pick 2, I would say the FEMA flood zones, because that could really affect the cost, because flood insurance is generally more than $1,000 a year. And so, that could price somebody out of a home, especially when typically buyers are buying as much as they possibly can get and don't have much wiggle room. So having the knowledge, of course, there's the risk, of living in a flood hazard zone, but trying to keep away from that insurance, that maybe unnecessary insurance that they don't want to pay. So understanding that, and then buyers also have to understand there are loopholes with FEMA flood zones. Sometimes there are ways to get out of paying flood insurance, and that's really depends on where the structure is built in relation to the flood zone. So like if there's a creek on the property, but just the back, or say the back 50 feet of the parcel is in a flood zone, but the structure is out.
I see.
You can get a waiver on that and not have to pay flood insurance. So that's, that's kind of a sidebar there. So sometimes there are loopholes with insurance. The other thing is Mello-Roos taxes. One of the reports we provide is a tax report that covers the Mello-Roos and 1915 Bond Act assessments. And this could really negatively impact a homeowner because they have to pay Mello-Roos taxes in addition to the regular property taxes. Okay. And there are some areas around the state where they might be paying upwards of $7,000 a year in just Mello-Roos taxes. And these are taxes that are funding infrastructure, such as paying for libraries or police departments, high schools, landscape and lighting, kind of things that people need for their everyday life. So you'll see these Mello-Roos taxes in newer developments usually,
Right.
Especially the ones that are excessive. Generally seeing the $1,000 to $2,000 a year is not rare. We see that a lot. But some areas around the state, Orange County, even in San Ramon area, Windermere area of San Ramon, you see some Mello-Roos taxes upwards of $7,000 a year. Yeah, so significant. Yeah. So read that tax report as well.
Has there been any recent legislations that have really affected how the NHD reports are prepared and read?
Yeah, their January 1st, new legislation took effect that changed the statutory natural hazard disclosure statement. So that was initially instituted in 1988, right? This is the series of yes/no checkboxes that you'll see on every NHD report. And so the first time, there's been some other minor changes to the signatures years ago, but this is the first change where we see the high and very high fire zones be much more clearly defined. Before, it was like, are you yes or no? Are you in or out? Now it's like, are you high? Are you very high? Or are you not in? And so it makes it a lot more precise and a lot more clear from the buyer standpoint to find out if they're in a high or very high zone. Because before it was really confusing the way the legislation was written and the way the form was. So, yeah. So we see some changes that are the actual zones themselves did not change yet,
right,
but the form changed. So,
how much should buyers be concerned about the environmental hazard reports?
Sure, that's a good question, and it's probably the most common question that we get as far as from a buyer. They might read that there might be certain contaminated sites within a radius of the property, and it sometimes it can be a big deal, sometimes it may not be. I mean, it's very common every time we do a report in Silicon Valley, a Valley Floor area, you're going to be within 1 mile of at least one site. But some areas you could be within 1 mile of 50 or 60 sites.
Right.
It really depends on where the property is. We have a lot of high-tech companies over the decades have dumped a lot of contaminants into the ground. It's infiltrated into the groundwater in some cases and will move with the groundwater. So therefore you have groundwater contamination. And from a buyer standpoint, that's probably something you would want to be aware of. Although they're not drinking groundwater, you're
right,
getting your water from different sources. But people are planting gardens. They're, playing around in the dirt, so to speak. So it's something that from a buyer standpoint, I wouldn't necessarily say I wouldn't buy a property that's near one of these areas, but it's good to be aware of it and actually do your own research and find out, maybe the site's been undergoing cleanup for 10 years, and now they're at the very final stages of cleaning everything up, and then it becomes a closed site. That's good. But if it's something new and really toxic and, it could sway a buyer's decision to maybe not purchase the property. It's really up to that individual to see what kind of tolerance what kind of risk they're willing to accept. So,
for the next episode of Real Estate IQ, featuring Travis Palser, the Vice President of Operations at HomeGuard.
Well, the roof is a very large system of the house. It's often pretty expensive, and it keeps water from being...
With expertise and a keen eye, he has assisted numerous Silicon Valley homeowners and investors. His journey and insights offer valuable lessons in property care and investment.
Is water. So the roof is a vital component of the home.
Check out our full episode on Tuesdays at 5 o'clock Pacific and 8 o'clock Eastern on YouTube and Apple Podcast. Thank you for listening to the podcast and acknowledging the wisdom of smart moves in real estate in Silicon Valley. Please share this episode with a friend, subscribe, and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts at Real Estate IQ. Thank you to our sponsor, TradeMyHome.com, for their client commitment and for making this podcast possible. If you're considering buying or selling a home, visit TradeMyHome.com. Until next time, remember to stay ahead in the real estate game.